I want to show you how to completely stop acid reflux once and for all. I had acid reflux really bad in college. I was downing massive amounts of Tums, not having a clue of what caused it. I really wish I knew back then what I know now, because it would have been so easy to correct. I mean, just months and months of suffering this terrible heartburn. I'd have to kind of sit up, like propped up in my bed to try to have it drained, because at night it would be terrible. So what is acid reflux? It's a situation where you're having acid that's regurgitating, coming up through a valve into the esophagus. And that valve is called the lower esophageal sphincter. Now, the most important thing you need to know about acid reflux is that it's caused by not enough acid. Okay, there's a deficiency of acid in your stomach, and that acid is not triggering a certain mechanism to close the valve at the top of the stomach, at the bottom of the esophagus, and then the valve doesn't close, and so the acid regurgitates. So the term for this low acid situation is called hypochlorhydria. That is the root cause of your heartburn. So that means low stomach acid. There's another condition called achlorhydria, which there's no acid in your stomach, okay? And that happens with people as they get older and older. In fact, as we age, we lose the acid in our stomach, and we have all sorts of digestive problems. 30% of the population over the age of 60 has a deficiency of stomach acid. So it's a big deal. So what happens is we get on antacids, we take medication to deal with this. And then, of course, the side effects from that are horrendous, because we're doing the exact opposite of what we should be doing. So it makes us feel better temporarily, but the next time we eat, it gets worse and worse and worse, and we never come off this medication. It is so important to ensure that our stomach has the right pH, and the normal pH of the stomach should be between 1 and 3. That is extremely acid. Okay. So on the pH scale, you have 7 being neutral. And so if it goes up like 8, 9, 10, that's more alkaline. As it goes below 7, that is more acid. In each whole number that you go down, it's by a factor of 10x. So in other words, a pH of 5 is 10 times more acid than a pH of 6. Okay. So if we're talking about a pH of 1 to 3, that is extremely acidic. And that's what you really need to break down proteins, to absorb minerals and vitamins like B12 and folic acid and vitamin C. And also another reason why we need it is to kill off microbes, fungus, bacteria, to prevent those microbes from growing in our small intestine. The key thing about the stomach, as far as the release of that acid and the closing of that valve, is that there's a link between the two. In other words, that valve normally should close if there's enough of a certain chemical called gastrin that causes the release of hydrochloric acid. So there's this communication from the level of acid to the valve, and that the closing and opening of the valve. And this whole thing is under parasympathetic control. Now, what does that mean? It's under the part of the nervous system that controls digestion and rest. Okay. So that opposes the other system that's called the sympathetic, which is the flight or fight. So what does that mean? The more stress that you have, the more acid reflux you're going to have too. Because as you increase the sympathetics, you decrease the parasympathetic. So stress is another reason why we have a lot of problems with the stomach, and the reason why we might have acid reflux, or another term for that would be GERD. Now, there's some other importances of having the right amount of acid, and I'm talking about hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid also helps you release bile from your gallbladder. It helps to cause the gallbladder to contract and release the bile to help you extract fat-soluble vitamins from your food, as well as omega-3 fatty acids, and help you break down fats. Also, this hydrochloric acid helps stimulate the pancreas to produce enzymes to help you digest food. So without that acid being at the right pH, you're not going to have sufficient bile released and you're not going to have sufficient enzymes released. And that's going to cause a lot of other problems a little bit lower down in this chain reaction. And then what happens is you might have bacteria and fungus that then grows in the small intestine, and that's called SIBO, called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And then every time you eat, you just feel bloated, you feel distended, and this will definitely occur if you're eating fiber and probiotics. So yeah, that's a situation. Also, one last thing about hydrochloric acid, you need the correct pH of the stomach to keep H. pylori in check. Normally, our bodies have H. pylori, and it's not creating any problem for us. But when we lose the stomach acid, then it comes out and it creates problems. So this is just another important reason why we need this HCl, hydrochloric acid, in our stomach. The other thing that can mess us up in relationship to not having enough hydrochloric acid is low zinc, which is very common for so many people. If you're low on zinc, you'll have a tendency to have problems with GERD, as well as acid reflux, as well as ulcers. So it takes a sufficient amount of zinc to make hydrochloric acid. It also takes other things like chlorides, as in sodium chloride, like salt, to make hydrochloric acid. It also takes a good amount of potassium to make hydrochloric acid. So it might be your problem is really coming from a zinc deficiency, maybe a chloride deficiency, or even a potassium deficiency. So it's not just about taking hydrochloric acid, it's about taking the raw materials that can actually build up your acid. Now, another thing that a lot of doctors do not have any information about is the connection between taking calcium and having too much calcium and having acid reflux or GERD. So one of the big side effects of taking a calcium and acid is acid reflux. It's completely insane. And the problem is, if you don't understand the connection, you could be giving someone the absolute worst thing to give them for that condition. So if you're going to your doctor for this condition, definitely tell them to research the link between hypercalcemia and GERD or acid reflux. Now, people don't just take calcium and acids. They take other types of medication for acid reflux, like PPIs, for example. And the problem with those medications is that there's some massive side effects, like inflammation in your kidney, nephritis, like getting fractures from osteoporosis, getting other pathogens like C. diff. So there are a lot of side effects from these antacids. All right, so here's the plan. This is what I recommend. The best remedy for this is to take something to build up your hydrochloric acid, and that's called betaine hydrochloride. And this is how you take it. You start off taking like 3 right before a meal. See how you feel, okay? Let's say you still have a problem, but it's better. Next meal, take 4. Next meal, take 5 before a meal, and you keep increasing it until your symptoms go away. And it could take 7, 8, or more of these little betaine hydrochloride tablets before you have no more acid reflux. Now, all this means is that you're very deficient in this acid and you have to build it back up, and it does take time. I would also recommend this. So let's say, for example, you're up to 8 betaine hydrochloride, okay, and your acid reflux goes away and you feel great. I would continue to take a little bit more until you start getting kind of like maybe a heartburn or a warmness in your stomach, which means you've taken too much. So then you can back off. That way you can know exactly how much you really need to fix this problem. Number 2, make sure you're getting enough potassium and sea salt in the diet, because those are the precursors to building hydrochloric acid. Number 3, I would make sure you're getting sufficient zinc, which is also very important in this process. And number 4, chew your food longer, okay? That's going to assist this whole process, especially right now. If you don't have enough hydrochloric acid in your stomach, you just